Hello everyone and welcome to a really cool game that was played yesterday in the ProChess League, and now I was just browsing the internet as I usually do, and I came across a tweet by the ProChess League that said that this is the worst position in the history of chess. So I of course was very interested in this position and the game that that resulted in this position. So here it is. I do hope you enjoy it. Let's check it out. Giri plays against Latvian Grandmaster Nikita Meshkovs, and it's quite the game. So let's check it out. Giri opens with d4. We have knight to f6, c4, e6, and now waiting to see if knight to c3 will be played to go maybe for the Nimzo Indian, or in this case knight to f3 by Giri, the anti-Nimzo, which kind of asks black, what do you want to do here? Do you want to continue d5? Do you want to go for b6, something that was played in this game, which transposes into the Queen's Indian defense, and well, the game does kind of remind of the Alpha Zero versus Stockfish games in the Queen's Indian defense openings, but you'll see what I mean. G3, Giri prepares to counter black's light square bishop by fianchettoing his own bishop. We have bishop to b7, bishop to g2, and now bishop to b4 with check. Bishop to d2 blocking, and now most often played moves are just bishop captures or bishop to e7, but here we have a5 by Meshkovs, which defends the bishop, and although white can capture and mess up black's pawn structure, black gets a semi-open file for his rook, so not really something white can brag about. We have castles by Giri, we have castles, and the bishop to f4. This is strongest, considered strongest in theory. Bishop back to e7, and now queen to c2. So both of them still in protected waters of theory. Now queen to c2, fighting for e4. At some point you might want to play rook e1 or maybe move the knight to get that e4 in. So bishop back to e4, pushing the queen back, queen c1, and now bishop back to b7, asking maybe Giri is interested in a nice draw by repetition after queen back to c2, bishop e4. But this is one game where Giri is not interested in a draw. He goes for knight to c3. Continues development. We have knight to e4 now, which is often what you want to do when you have a bishop on b7 in the Queen's Indian defense, the Nimzo Indian defense, and similar defenses when you have a light square bishop fianchettoed. And now knight to b5, going after the c7 pawn. We have c6, now pushing the knight back, and now knight back to c3. Knight to c7, although it looks very strong, after rook to a7, it doesn't really do all that much. Yes, you have a knight here, but at some point something like d6 can be played, and well, you're just gonna have to say that knight is terribly misplaced. And there's no good way to actually continue this for white. You could go for some d5 ideas, but in the end, black will come out on top. So after c6, knight back to c3, we have captures on c3, Giri recaptures, and now d6. And this is a new move in the game, in the position. There is a game where d5 was played, Yan Lu versus Vidit, was played last year. The game ended in a draw, but here d6 is a new move. So already as of move 14, we have a completely new game. So let's see what happens. Giri finally gets his e4 move in. We have knight to d7, and now rook 8 to d1, preparing to meet knight f6 with e5, which would be very strong. And even though you could go for knight e4, attack the queen, queen c2, and now d5, white should definitely be better here, as at some point black will have to make a breakthrough with either f6 or f5. He's going to have a weak e6 pawn, and white should be able to take advantage of that. But it is playable. But black instead goes b5, and Giri replies with c5. He still wants to open up the center, as his rook is nicely aligned with the queen. So black closes the center, but first knight to f6. Going after the e4 pawn, Giri defends it, queen to c2, and only now d5 closing the center. We have e5 further closing the center, and knight to e8. And now it's always a question who benefits more from the closed center, but I can tell you who doesn't benefit. This light square bishop here, that's a pretty bad piece. And okay, at some point b4 will be played. Maybe you can activate the bishop via the a6 square. but we'll see. H4, Giri grabs more space on the king side. He prepares to further push, and now this really does resemble of the AlphaZero versus Stockfish games, where this light square bishop really didn't participate in the game all that much. We have B4. Black, of course, wants to activate the bishop right away, and now knight to G5, already threatening mate, asking Black to further weaken his king side. So G6. Or you could capture, but Meshkovs decides that G6 is better for now. Knight back to F3 as the knight no longer has any use there, and bishop to A6 now. Developing the bishop, attacking the rook, rook Fe1, and now knight to G7. The knight can now come to either F5 or H5, but Giri doesn't allow it. Bishop to H6. Now the knight cannot move as the rook would hang, so we have rook to A7. And now comes queen to d2, just remaneuvering some pieces. Rook to e8. Now the knight can finally move, but now g4. It's an excellent move Giri found. Grabs more space and doesn't allow the knight to jump to f5, and also it comes with a pawn sacrifice if Black is willing to capture it. However, grabbing this would just result in a quick death for Black. For example, captures, and queen to f4, and now you can see that this rook is coming to e3, then to h3, and then, well, yeah, it's just very easy to play. For example, you can capture here, go queen h6 check, capture on h7, and so on. So g4, brilliant move by Giri, which prevents the knight from entering the game, but also the pawn is poisonous. So bishop back to c8 by Black, and now bishop to h3. We have king to h8, preparing to bring the rook to g8, and now bishop back to g5. Again, asking, are you maybe interested in some trade so I can get my knight to g5, which would pressure the f7 pawn. Maybe I can get the queen to f4, pile up on the f7 pawn. Black is not interested. Meshkovs goes for rook to g8, but now queen f4, as the f7 pawn is now weak. Well, maybe not weak, but definitely undefended. So queen to f8, defending, and now bishop to f6. Giri slowly by slowly, squeezes the position. We have rook to b7, and now bishop back to f1. To support with the attack on the queen side that is coming, Giri wants to play a3, bust open the position here, and maybe get some rooks into the game this way. So bishop captures on f6 for the lack of a better move. We have e captures on f6, pushing the knight once again back to e8, and now knight to e5. And now this is an excellent square for the knight, and well, it's hard to say where Black's position is going to deteriorate, but there are a lot of ideas. We have rook to c7 as the c6 pawn is under attack. Well, was under attack, and now g5. We have bishop back to b7. Now again, adding another defender here, but this bishop just is having the worst day. We have a3. Finally, Giri is ready to bust open the position here, bring the rooks into the game. And we have bishop back to a8. A captures on b4, a captures on b4, and now rook to a1, threatening to just win the bishop. So bishop back to b7, but now rook to a7, you double up rooks this way. This rook is coming to a1 now. We have h5, asking, maybe you're interested in capturing en passant, then I can get king to h7, and I no longer have to worry about the king side. But Giri says there's no need for that. I just continue with my plan. Rook a to e1, king to h7 by Meshkovs, and now rook to a4, going after the pawn here. It's not much you can do to defend the pawn. You can play b3, but now just rook to b4 with a double attack on the pawn and the bishop. So bishop to c8, offering a rook trade. But of course, Giri is not interested in trading. He wants to further, get the most out of the position. So rook to a8. He's now preparing to bring the other rook to b8. We have rook to h8, wasting a move. There's not much to do here, and also Black is extremely low on time here. We have rook b to b8, and here we have pretty much the immortal Zugzwang. There's nothing to be done here. You cannot move anything. Rook captures on c8 is coming, and there really is no move you can play. I mean, you could try and waste a move, but doesn't really do anything, just captures. And your only attempt maybe at not losing material is bishop here for some reason. to try and guard the knight this way, but a lot of moves win here for white. So just for example, rook here, next move you're gonna pick up the bishop, and there's nothing you can do here. So yeah, after this rook b to b8, rook to b7 was played for some reason, as black was extremely low on time, a few seconds on the clock. Giri just gobbled up the bishop here with rook captures on c8, and it was in this position that Nikita Meshkovs resigned the game, and this beautiful positional masterpiece was created by Giri. So yeah, that's the game. Like I said, really reminds you of the Queen's Indian defense, Alpha Zero played against Stockfish, where Stockfish really struggled, couldn't get anything into play, and in the end, like here, that bishop really did nothing. In the end, it just disappeared. But it's really hard, and it really makes you think: should you play this Queen's Indian defense idea as well? Maybe it can be played, but after all that Alpha Zero Stockfish, the games, it just seems like every Queen's Indian defense game I see ends up in black just being completely destroyed. But yeah, that's the position, the worst position in chess history. I'm sure there are a few that could compete with it for the #1 spot, but as the ProChess League tweeted it like this, I decided to leave it as a title. So yeah. Once again, I do hope you enjoyed it. I would like to thank David Gill, Stephen White, Stephen Beck, Amir Yunam, and Jeff Graves for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to cover the Paul Morphy saga, continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions, and whatever else happens in the chess world, such as this game with the worst chess position ever. And also a question for the end: what do you think of Giri's chances in the candidates tournament? That is coming very soon. In 12 days it starts. So yeah, thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.